everyone, I hope you're okay and staying safe. We're going to move on now with lesson 9 today. I hope you enjoyed not having to listen to my voice yesterday with lesson 8. I've had some feedback that the projector is a bit blurry, but I understand that. I'm trying to make a kind of in my living room, and my projector's a really old one. So I've made it a bit bigger today. I might be in the way a little bit, but we'll see how it goes, see which one's better. But let me know if you have any problems. Anyway, so we're going to move on to lesson 9. Lesson 9 is looking at the 2 leaders of that third crusade that you looked at yesterday. So you should now know all of the basics. You should know what happened, in what order it happened, because that's really important. Some of the key events. And you should have been, while you were creating that storyboard, you should have been thinking about those 2 leaders and what did that mean? Well, how did they both come across, really? What do we know about them both just by knowing the story? So we're going to look a little bit deeper now today at the 2 leaders, and you're going to have a go at comparing the 2 leaders. Okay? So this is what I'm going to ask you to do. You're going to be comparing the leadership of Richard the Lionheart and Saladin. Okay? So the leadership. So we're looking at them as people, but we're also looking at how they led their armies, their religious armies. Okay? So here are your tasks. You will be reading the information about both leaders in the SHP page 96 and 97 textbook of Google Classroom. You know where the textbooks are. They're in the same place as the others, okay, as all of this work. So you should be able to find that, and it's the SHP one is clearly labelled SHP, and these are the pages that you will be looking at, okay. Then you're going to create the Venn diagram for 2 different leaders. Then you're going to compare 2 sources. You're going to annotate the sources, and then you're going to write a quick paragraph about which leader you think you would rather fight for. Then you're going to answer some questions. Now, we don't do this very often in Excellence, this kind of question and answer. But this one's a good one because you're going to use the textbook. So you can come away from the computer if you're lucky enough to be able to print those 2 pages. You can come away from the computer and you can work away to give your eyes a bit of a rest. And then you're going to write out a PEE answer. We're going to have a go at doing that together as well. Well, I say together, I'm going to pretend that I've got a class in front of me, and we'll have a go at writing one together, so that gives you a little bit more hint, because looking at your work that you've been sending in, although not many of you have, to be fair, looking at the work that you've been sending in, I can see that we need to maybe do a little bit of work on this to make sure those skills are ready for you for year 8 or for when this comes to an end. Okay, so moving on with the lesson. Here are our 2 leaders. See, I'm a little bit in the way now, but I'll try and keep to the side. Here are our 2 leaders, Richard the Lionheart, the English king, and we've got Saladin here, who was the Muslim leader. So you're going to be thinking about all the way through this lesson, who was the greater hero? So when you talk about, you need to think about that word hero. What does hero mean to you? Because it might mean something different to lots of different people. At the moment, we've got lots of heroes that wear all sorts of different kind of masks, facades at the moment, haven't we? If we think about that idea that a hero doesn't always need a cape. A hero is somebody who does something to help somebody else, or something that above and beyond what they normally do. And at the moment in this country, our heroes aren't our footballers, are they? And our not so much our politicians, but our heroes aren't our footballers and our celebrities, the Kardashians. At the moment, our heroes are the people who are working really hard for us. So you need to think about, for you, what do you think a hero is? So there's no right and wrong to this answer. It's going to be what you think based on the sources, based on the things that you found out about these 2 leaders. So we're going to ask you just one question though. You might wonder why. Well, if we are living in England and we are talking about England history, and we're looking at this as a historic piece of work, a history piece of work, as well as an RE piece of work, why wouldn't we just learn about Richard? Why do we have to know about the leader of Saladin? Okay, so I want you just ever so quickly to think about, why would it be dangerous to only study about Richard or Saladin and not find out about the other? Have a little moment just to think about, why would it be dangerous? Why do you think it's really important when we talk about wars, when we learn about wars, that we learn about both sides of the argument? Okay, so pretend that you were thinking. I'm going to pretend that you've been putting your hands up. So hopefully you've come up with this idea that you need to know both sides of an argument so that you know exactly what happened. We know that idea of bias if you've got a one-sided argument. We also need to know maybe how they both think, and what we find out is both of them are actually thinking very similar things. You need both sides of the argument so that you can empathise with both sides. And to learn about history means we don't repeat mistakes. We don't do the same thing again. So by understanding, rather than just thinking we were right to do what we did or wrong to do what we did, we can think about those two different ideas and those two different viewpoints. And that's your key to those higher levels in all of the subjects we do, history, geography, RE, and extended out to the other curriculum, such as English, or when you come to your GCSEs, is to always think of different viewpoints. That's why I've been drumming into you every day about conjunctions, but about those contrasting conjunctions. However, although, on the other hand, so that way then you show a balanced understanding of a topic. You might still believe that Richard was the bigger hero. We're not saying you have to be on another side, but it's really important that you show your understanding of different points of view. Okay, so that's why that is important. So this is your task today. You can see you've got a pen, so yes, you've got to write it. I'm getting lots of questions like, where do I write things, or my book is finished. You need to use your own independence there. I can't get books to you. I can't get to school. I can't pick them up. I can't drop them off. So unfortunately, you're going to need to, if you've started finishing your book, to start thinking about where you're going to record your work. But I don't think that's a question you really need to be asking your excellence teachers right now, because that seems to be one of our top questions at the moment. So we've got a pen. You're going to create this Venn diagram for me. Now, I'm sure you've done Venn diagrams, but a really quick reminder. In this circle here is going to be all the things that you find out about Richard the Lionheart. Okay, so that's going to go in this circle. Then in this circle here is all of the things that we know about Saladin as a person, as a leader, what he did, some of his actions. And then where they both cross here is obviously things that Richard did, said, acted, personality, parts of the story, reasons for fighting, reasons for leading. And then the same with Saladin. So which things do they have the same? So straight away we know they were the leaders. So that would go here, wouldn't it? Whereas Richard was the leader of the Christians, whereas Saladin was the leader of the Muslims. So straight away we've got something similar, something different. You're going to use the pages of 96 and 97 of SHP to create that Venn diagram. You probably know some things if you did lesson 8 really well. So you can add anything else that you've learned about, any other videos you've watched, absolutely anything. It doesn't only have to be what you've seen in these pictures. If you can't remember, go where to find the textbook. Go back into your Google Classroom where you found this PowerPoint, okay, and you'll find the textbooks there. It's the SHP one you're looking for. So if I just quickly, oh, wrong one, sorry. If I quickly put up mine here, that's the page that we're looking for right now. So it's the SHP, page 96 on the bottom, but obviously the pages on the PDF aren't as much as 96, so we're looking at that 96 there. You're going to read all about Richard the Lionheart. You're going to read the sources. There are some more sources here. Sorry, I'm in the way. Okay, there's some more details there. There were lots of details on yesterday's. You can go back to that slide and find out. Okay, so lots of things there that can help you build up that Venn diagram. This Venn diagram should really be full, but what the challenge might be, this bit will be easy to fill. Maybe the challenge will be putting really relevant, appropriate things in these sides. Okay, and then you've got an extension there. Write about who you would want to fight for and why. So I'm going to pause, you can pause, I'm not going to pause it, you're going to pause the video now and you can get on with that Venn diagram if you want to away from the screen. If not, you could watch this whole video and then you've got your work that you can get on with. So, moving on. On that SHP page, there are these two sources. They're just the ones that are literally taken from that page. So you could, if you printed out, if you've been lucky and you printed out those pages, again, you don't need to be near the screen for this one. So here we're looking at these two sources, and remember, history is all about looking at the sources, but we also need to think about the origin of those sources. Who's written them? Where have they come from? What impact will that have on how we look at the source and how we read the source? So let's have a look at source 1, taken from the Journey of King Richard by an English churchman. King Richard, alone, berserk, came on the Muslims. No man could escape his sword. He made a clear path as if mowing hay with a scythe. Richard waited 3 weeks for Saladin to release the Christian prisoners and return the Holy Cross. But Saladin only sent gifts and messages and did not keep his promises. A council of the Crusaders' leaders agreed to behead the Muslim prisoners. King Richard ordered that 2,700 prisoners be led out of the city and executed. So, let's just have a look at that source for a moment. First of all, you need to know that dots here means there's lots in between that have been missed out, but these are the key bits that we pulled out from this. So, this was taken from the Journey of King Richard. So it's somebody writing about King Richard. So we know then that that's an interpretation of an English churchman. So that is really important. Think why? Absolutely. Thinking about that idea that the church were the ones who were leading this crusade. Remember, right back to the first crusade with Pope Urban II. The church were leading this idea of a holy war. So what would that churchman, why would he need to? What's the purpose? Who's he writing for? And what's the purpose of his writing? You should be thinking about, would he want people to carry on fighting, carry on joining the Crusades? And we know the Crusades went on and on and on after this third crusade. So was there another reason why he would have needed to have written in the way that he did? So you need that at the back of your mind when you read this source. So here we've got King Richard alone, berserk. Okay, two quite contrasting words here. He was alone. So what would that do to an audience? How would that make an audience feel if you were said that your leader was on your own? Okay, if somebody said to you, Miss Jones is on her own right now and Miss Ralph is on her own right now, how would you feel? You would probably feel a little bit sorry for them. You would empathise with where they are, wouldn't you? So straight away, we're empathising with King Richard. If you were a Christian, our poor King Richard, he's on his own. Berserk, okay, so that means a bit crazy if somebody goes berserk. So while he was alone, so there was no one else helping him, he was crazy, he came on the Muslims. So that means he maybe necessarily wasn't looking for them. He wasn't this leader who was going to try and get them all. He came on them as if by accident. So what does that suggest to you? No man could escape his sword. So straight away we get this idea of this man on his own coming across this Muslim, but he's risen to the challenge, okay? No one could escape his sword. He made a clear path as if mowing hay with a scythe. So you know when you see people hitting the hay and creating that pathway, that's the image that this churchman has created here, okay? Then we've got some obviously text missing, then we come back in. Richard waited 3 weeks for Saladin to release the Christian prisoners. So I would be very interested to know what was left out of here. What happened after this, if he was on his own and he went through. But then we know he survived because then he waited. So we've got this idea of this hero, this soldier, this warrior who has defeated all of these Muslims, okay? So then Richard waited 3 weeks for Saladin to release the Christian prisoners and return the Holy Cross. So we're going back to the church here. So Christians would be, they've taken the cross, the Holy Cross, okay? They've taken Christian prisoners, so this goes back to that Pope Urban, the speech, our fellow Christians, that are brothers in arms, our brothers, okay? So straight away, suddenly, we're thinking, oh my gosh, Saladin is doing something terrible to our faith because we're Christian brothers and taking our cross. Okay, but also, interestingly, the fact that he says waited 3 weeks gives you the impression that Richard was actually patient. He was a good leader. He didn't go and just take revenge, did he? He's waited for Saladin to do the right thing. And according to this, he hasn't quite done the right thing. He hasn't released the prisoners, even though Richard waited 3 weeks. But Saladin only sent gifts and messages and did not keep his promises. Well, we don't know what those promises were at this stage, do we? But without knowing that, we will presume that he's promised to release the prisoners and the cross because Richard waited for that. So if somebody breaks their promises, suddenly they're not such a great person, are they? But there's a confusing bit here, sent gifts and messages. So that gives us this idea, we're not saying he's all bad, okay, because that might look too biased, but also it questions maybe the sanity of Saladin. Why would you send gifts to the person you're fighting? Why wouldn't you send the people who you would this impression gives you as being promised to return those Christian prisoners? A council of Crusaders leaders agreed to behead the Muslim prisoners. Now, what's really interesting about this part, you've got a council, so that idea of a group of people who have decided this. If a group of people have decided, suddenly it sometimes makes difficult decisions seem okay because that's what lots of people have decided. They've talked about it, they've looked at both sides of the argument, they've looked at the good and the bad, and now they've gone on to decide this thing based on those ideas. Okay, so a council of Crusaders leaders agreed to behead the Muslim prisoners. So this council of Crusaders, we know the Crusaders were Christians. So the Christians are going to trust another Christian. However, what do you know about councils led by a king in the Middle Ages? Think about some of the things that we've talked about in the past. Think about the idea of the king being the ultimate ruler with the church, although the church obviously having that slight higher power. But we know everybody did everything the king said. Think about our work on King Henry VIII and when he executed Anne Boleyn. Yes, there was a trial, but we know he was the head of the trial. Again here, King Richard would have been the head of that council. Do you think there would have been anybody there saying, I don't think we should be doing this because of these reasons, going against what the king might have wanted? Have a little think about that. Okay, so The Crusaders agreed to behead the Muslim prisoners. So this is the first time we find out that actually there are Muslim prisoners as well. So both armies, both religious armies, have taken their own prisoners. So really, we should be thinking, well, if they've got Christian prisoners, then we should have Muslim prisoners. So it's okay, because they've got our prisoners. Because it comes a little bit further down, we got this idea that maybe they took ours first, possibly, before they took theirs. Maybe promises suggest that he's done something wrong, Saladin has, rather than Richard. So by having this idea of Muslim prisoners down here, we've kind of we're okay with it. It doesn't shock us. We don't link with the fact that we are horrified they're not releasing the Christian prisoners, even though technically we're not releasing their prisoners either. Does that make sense? I think I might have said that in a quite confusing way. Apologies. So King Richard ordered that 2,700 prisoners be led out of the city and executed. So if he ordered, really was it much to do with the council's decision? You've got to ask yourself that. Okay. What does this tell us about King Richard? If we didn't have this bit here, Saladin only sent gifts and messages, and then we executed the the Christians executed the Muslims. Okay, what does that tell you a little bit about King Richard? So have a little think about all of that. Does that fit with some of the things that you've read so far? Does that fit with some of the things you might have seen on YouTube about Richard? What would you like to know more about? What do you think? What evidence you think is missing before you make a judgment on him? So let's have a look at this other one now. I'm going to move to the other side. I'm not so keen on teaching from this side, but we'll have a go. Okay, so here our source 2 was written by Bahauddin, Saladin's secretary. So someone much closer to Saladin than just an English churchman. We don't even know if this English churchman was on the crusade himself. He could have been writing that from back in England, in the safety of England. But this, we've got Saladin's secretary. So that would have been a person very close to Saladin who would have seen what he was doing, who would have seen what had happened. Let's have a look at the source. This King of England was courageous, energetic and daring in combat. So, straight away we've got different words, haven't we? I'll read it all first and then I'll come back, sorry. This King of England was courageous, energetic, daring in combat. When he arrived at the acre, the Franks let out cries of joy. The Muslims were filled with fear. And the English king broke his word to the Muslim prisoners who had surrendered the city in return for their lives. If Saladin paid their ransom, they were to be freed. If he did not, they were to become slaves. When he saw that Saladin delayed payment, he secretly changed his mind. Even after he received the money, he ordered the cold-blooded slaughter of more than 3,000 men. Very, very different indeed. Different tone, different words, different way of writing. So let's break this down. The King of England was courageous, energetic and daring in combat. So are they saying negative things about him? In here, okay,